Diane Fuller. I'm listed in the program for the workshop here called Atulitseen, What We Cherish. And I'm a storyteller, and I treasure the stories that have been shared with me from many people. But I'm not the presenter. The presenter is Mike, the sound guy. This is my partner, Mike Sakarias from Juneau.
So I'm Mike Sakarias, came over from Juneau today to convince you or to enable you to believe you can record family stories. It's not hard, and unlike 50 and 60 years ago when all of these things were recorded on cassette tapes, most of us are carrying around a very capable recording instrument in our pocket, the cell phone. So I want to mention a couple of things I've been doing. Let me get my computer woken up, otherwise I won't know what I'm doing. There we go. I worked for KTO Radio and helped out with KTO TV. I have been spending a lot of my retirement years recording sounds and turning them into sound effects. I've done a lot of contract work for Sealaska Heritage Institute and others, taking the old cassette tapes that people have stored and saved for years and years and dubbing them into digital files and then cleaning them up so they can be shared. And so I'm going to take some of that experience and let you know that you can do the same thing, but you don't have to have a cassette tape that I have to clean up later. Or at least we'll hope you'll be doing a better job than some of the old recordings. And how important this is, this spring I was in touch with Craig Schools. They had some old cassette tapes that were recorded, most of them as part of a school project where the kids would interview their grandpa, grandma, or anybody else and ask them questions. And being cassette tapes, they're almost impossible to share. And being 50 years old, some of them were pretty fragile. I had to repair them so I could play them once. But when I delivered the audio files to them, it made some people cry because they could hear people long dead telling their stories. And so every generation has their elders. Some of them are with us here, and if you're a young person, you want to preserve the stories they have. What was their life like? So, cell phone is a recording device. There's not really enough time to teach you individually. Oh, Ann's going to hand out, until I run out, handouts. Basically, it's telling you what I'm going to say today so that if I skip over anything, you can say, but Mike, you said blah, blah, blah. It's on the sheet. I think I may run out, but if there are any questions, we'll get to those later because I want to make sure we get questions answered. Anyway, cell phones, an iPhone or any Android device has an application on it. For an Android, it's called Voice Recorder. And for the iPhone, it's called Voice Memo. And both of those are very good at recording voices. And the information on that sheet tells about how to set those up to record with the highest quality you can manage. Because you don't want to have sort of the chance of a lifetime to talk to somebody, make a recording, and then have it turn out to be kind of crummy. In this instant, the internet, and especially YouTube, is your friend. If you have an Android device and somebody on there has gone to great length to post a vlog telling you how to set this up and record it. But the key thing for all of this is you set the recorder up so that it records in the highest quality it's capable of. MP3s are not very good files. In order to create an MP3, some of the audio is just tossed away, and it can never be recovered. But you can still record high-quality, lossless files with your cell phone. Question of how to set up a session. Well, if you have an elder, for example, you want to have them feel comfortable with the recording. So maybe you're doing it at the kitchen table, maybe it's in the living room. Wherever it is, it needs to be a space that they are happy with. And for you as the recordist, because that's what you're going to become, a recordist is somebody who records, you need to pay attention to what the space is like. So if we just close our eyes right now and listen. This is a pretty quiet space, but while I am talking, the echo, the footfalls, breathing, somebody next to you chatting, our brain is an amazing device, a brain in our ear. We can hear things and decode things with a brain in our ear that a recorder is just going to record. A recorder records everything that's in there. And probably most of you have been in large gatherings where you're talking to somebody and there are many other people talking in the same space. But you are able to look at the person you are talking to and hear them, even though there's other sounds that are almost as loud. We're using our eyes and we're using our ears and we're concentrating on the person. But a recorder, a cell phone, or even professional gear that costs a couple $1,000s, it is going to pick up every sound that's around you. And some of that's going to make it hard to hear the sound that you want to hear. I've got some examples that I'll play a little bit later of things that I had to clean up. And what I'm hoping is that the future me, the future person that takes old recordings, doesn't have to do all the cleanup to make them sound good. So how do you interview somebody? If it's somebody you know, and you sort of have to know you can't go and talk to somebody and just say, tell me about your life. You need to have some idea of what they know so that you can ask them questions. And so if it is somebody that you know that they have a story about this event, or you want to know what it's like when they came to a certain space or when they moved from a place. And so having that in your mind allows you to ask questions. The open-ended questions, the questions that gets people talking, are the type you want to ask, not how old were you when you came here? I was 25. That's not a conversation. But if you have a follow-up question, and it can be as simple as, what was it like? Anything that gets people talking is a good thing. Some people will talk and you can hardly stop them, and that's good. But some people, you have to encourage them and coax them because maybe they don't think it's that important a story. But for you, it is. And even if it's, in the end, it's not the world-shaking story that's going to change life, it's important to you to capture that story. And it can be somebody you know, it can be somebody you don't know. After you get experience with this and feel confident of your recording capabilities, you're going to encounter people that you don't know. I did that with what's called the Tustamina Story Project. My sound partner and I were recording people to get their stories about riding the ferry, the Tustamina, up and down Southwest Alaska. And we didn't know any of them to begin with, but we knew enough of the story of where they were coming from, and the Tustamina itself, that we could ask them questions to get them talking. When you're interviewing somebody, you should take notes, because maybe they've said something that creates a question in your mind. I want to ask about that, but I don't want to interrupt what they're saying now. And if you have a note about that, you can look back and say, a little while ago you mentioned such and such. Tell me about that. So where to do a recording? A quiet space. But as you heard here, there's sounds in the room. These are not loud, but most spaces have things like ventilation, other sounds. The refrigerator's going on if you're in a house. In fact, let me play some things that were things I had to clean up in recordings on these 50-year-old cassettes. So you can find out how disturbing this is to listen along and have this in the recording.
Yes, we are.
Fine. I'll get Sylvester.
Something in here?
So two things in that little snippet. One, the people that were being recorded were far away from the mic, so their voices were not being heard very well. And so where you place the mic is really important. You don't want it right in their mouth, and with a cell phone, it's not really a microphone, but you want it close enough to them that that is the loudest sound into the mic. And even if there's other sounds there, they are quiet and in the background, and that's okay. But if, like this telephone, it totally drowned out everything that was being said underneath it. Here's another clip of something that similar, low voices to start with.
I think this is right here using poetry. That's not really good. Second
Okay, that was mic handling. The person doing the recording was moving the microphone. They couldn't hear that they were making a noise into the microphone, but they were banging the mic and jostling it, and that became the loudest sound in the recording. So you're constantly, as a recorder, paying attention to the sounds that are in the room and the sounds that maybe you're making with the recorder. If you are realizing maybe I need to move the microphone closer to the person, you can actually have them stop talking briefly while you do that, and then that can easily be cut out later. Another problem with recording people is
We have bigger charts. We just want to know.
so far from the microphone and several voices at the same time. If you're just talking to somebody one-on-one, it's pretty easy to control who's talking. It's either going to be you or them. But if you have several people and they're excited to say things, all of a sudden you have multiple voices, which, if they're close to the mic, maybe that works out okay, but maybe it doesn't work out if they're far away and it's just all one big muddiness. There was one recording, several of the recordings I worked on this winter, it seemed like everybody had the same health issue, and they were always the closest person to the microphone. Coughing. The people that they were being recorded were far from the mic. The person with the cough was right next to the mic. Here's an example of a problem when you're in a house.
As this is understanding from the history that there has been 2 floods.
Household sounds, doors, kids, it can be a television. I've had all variety of things. Let's see. There was one set of recordings I worked on which were working on place names in Southeast Alaska. So they were making heavy use of paper maps, way back in the days when paper maps were a thing. It wasn't all on Google Earth or anything. And so this is a recording with paper maps being the lead character.
My niece, she's married to a Coast Guard commander, and she told me if I would have Coast Guard wife.
So there again, I think at that particular moment they were just chatting about the maps, so there was nothing lost. But if anything was being said that was important, it was going to be overridden by the sound of the maps. Okay, one more that was just amazing. There was about 3 hours worth of recordings, and you can probably guess where in the house this recording was made by the content of the extra sounds.
Please.
That's not a big summer camp, but there was never a village there.
Okay.
Sometimes there were maybe 100 people,
266.
sometimes 10 people, they just did it out. But mostly
also
Fort Tongass people, that string line that he put out. And I destroyed all the women, all right.
So Why they spent 3 hours recording next to an open window with a road outside, I don't know. But that's the problem with the human brain. We could hear the person talking and we just ignored the extra sounds, but the recorder doesn't. It's going to hear all of that stuff. So as a recorder, having a quiet space, and if there's something that's an interrupting sound, take a break, stop things for the moment until that sound goes away, or you can take care of it. Don't just continue on, because where the heavy truck and the plane came through, it's impossible for somebody like me to get rid of that sound, or it's really difficult to get rid of it, and it's never going to be perfect. When you're recording with somebody, sometimes the sessions can be long. You may have this person may have a lot of things you want to record and want to say, so prepare to take breaks, prepare to have water for the person who's doing the talking. And you've just heard some things to avoid. There's one other thing about any recording you do, and that is called slating. So what the heck is slating? Well, here's an example of slating.
This is the interview with Harvey Milton and Samson Harry in Yakutat, November 14th, 1974.
So all they did was, at the very beginning of the recording, introduced who they were talking to, where they were located, what the date was, and I would suggest that if you're doing this, put your name there too, because you're part of the history of whatever recording event you're doing. And this allows somebody 50 years later to find this recording and know where it came from. Because paper notes can very easily get removed from proximity to the recording, but if it's on the recording, put it there. If you forget at the beginning, do it at the end. But always slate your tape, and it's called slating because way back in movie days, they had slate chalkboards and those clapperboards, you've seen them maybe if you're watching the making of movies. Those do a couple of things, but one of the things they do is tell exactly what is in that recording, what the scene is, what the movie is, what the day is, what the take number is, so that the people that are doing the editing later know exactly where this came from and what it was. And you do the same thing with your audio recordings. You slate them, but you don't have to draw on a chalkboard. And nowadays, the movie slates have digital displays and stuff like that, so they're much different. Let's see. Maybe I should pause here. I don't want to run away too much, and I do want to allow people questions. So am I confusing anybody so far? Okay.
I was going to say, for me, this is great. This is awesome, and I love the directions as I was reading through it, because again, I've done many recordings and had lots of that. So again,
well, like I said, for the future me who's going to be editing these tapes for some other use, if they don't have to worry about this, there's software that does amazing things with audio, and I won't describe it here, but you can ask me about it after the session. But I can fix a lot of things rather surgically, but it's much better if it's not there to begin with, because then you can do simpler things to make it sound good. Yes?
So my other question too, just like you were talking about, I've got a bunch of old cassette tapes of songs that my family recorded. And we've been trying to figure out how can we get it digitized.
Okay, let's talk about that a little bit. So the question is, I have a bunch of old cassette tapes. How do I turn those into digital files? The way I do it, and I've done it for Sea Alaska, so I've done it on contract for them, so they pay me for it, because it's fairly time-consuming. You have to have a good cassette player, and then be able to connect that cassette player to your computer and have software that can record audio that's input to your computer. In my case, since I do it commercially, I use what's called a product from Adobe called Audition. And so I record directly into my computer so it becomes a digital file to begin with. Thinking about the cassette player itself, you occasionally need to maintain the cassette player, not that you have to go in and work on its guts, but the metal oxide on the cassette as it rubs across the playback head can leave a little bit of residue on the playback heads that can affect later times that you play back a recording. And so you need to occasionally clean the playback heads and the rollers with isopropyl alcohol and a Q-tip. And if you can find it anymore, you need something to demagnetize the tape head. Degauss it is the term, because it'll slowly accumulate magnetism from the tape it's playing back, and this will end up in a small way distorting the sound that you end up recording onto your computer. So cleaning the playback heads and degaussing them, demagnetizing them. And those are things, again, I mentioned for using your phone as a recording device. YouTube, there's a lot of junk on YouTube, but there are a lot of very conscientious people that have put up amazing information on how to do things. And all you'd start, fall down rabbit holes on how to do this or that on YouTube. So does that help a question there?
Yes.
Okay. Let's see, where was I? So the recording session, open-ended questions, do some research. Some people you'll find are uncomfortable being recorded. I mean, having a microphone in front of you can make people nervous. It can make people such that they don't talk freely. So you somehow need to, that's one advantage of the cell phone. It's such a common device. You can place it in the middle of the table between you if you're at a table. You can place it in the arm of a chair and get the person to look at you and not pay any attention to the microphone. And this will get them to relax. You're carrying on a conversation with the person you're interviewing, and you're getting them to talk, but sometimes you need to be there too to ask the questions, to get asked the follow-up. It is not as important to get your voice onto the recording as it is to get the person you're talking to. And so any microphone is going to pick up you talking. You may be well in the background on the recording, but your question is going to be heard. I think one thing to avoid is too much animation, vocal animation on your part, because maybe you'll end up accidentally talking over the person you actually want to listen to. So use your face, use nodding, use silent mouth words. Say thank you, but don't actually say thank you. When you need to talk and ask a question or communicate, wait for them to stop talking. But you can communicate a lot of. You don't want to be just deadpan talking to somebody. So using your face, using your eyebrows, using your eyes, smiling. Quizzical, your eyebrows are very expressive. You can communicate to the person and keep them engaged in what they're telling you by making sure they know you are interested in what they are saying. And that's probably the biggest gift that an interviewer can give to an interviewee, is to really be interested in what they're telling you. I don't want to, I should. There are news interviewers that make a big deal, apparently, of trying to ask this long-winded question to demonstrate how much they know. I hate those people, because I want to hear the person that they brought in to interview. And so you should approach that the same way. You've spent the time setting up a space and arranging for this person to be there, so it's important to hear them. One key tip on recording: when you think you're done, do not turn off the recorder. Because some of the best stuff happens at the end or after the end, when they think you're no longer recording, but you still are, because you're going to wait until they've left the room. And then, because you can always cut the stuff off at the end if there's nothing there. But if you've turned it off and oh shoot, I missed the beginning of the story, or I missed it entirely. So don't turn off your recorder, just leave it on. Got plenty of memory in that for an hour-long or 2-hour-long audio file, so another 10 minutes is not going to hurt. Let's see, what else? Oops. I'm so used to using my iPad. Laptops do not have scrollable touch screens. Okay, so let me talk a little bit if you want to go beyond what's on the cell phone. But I would encourage you to go ahead and use the cell phone because you probably already have it and it's really pretty good. But if you want to get into some additional recording equipment, because that's always fun, there are a lot of handheld recorders on the market that produce wonderful results. They have great built-in microphones. Marantz, Zoom, Tascam names, but you can go onto sites and just Google or do search for audio recorders, and you'll have a whole bunch of options. A lot of those will allow you to use separate microphones, and that is a whole other rabbit hole that audio engineers fall down and will admit they fall down because everybody has their own idea of a microphone. You probably don't need that, but that is it gives you some capabilities for setting up a recording session where the equipment doesn't have to be in the middle of it all. You can run a cable and a microphone. A type of microphone called a lavalier mic is something used a lot on TV talking heads. You see there's a little thing clipped to their collar or something like that. That's actually a little microphone. And that picks up sound quite well. It's unobtrusive. If I'm using that at a recording session, I probably won't clip it to somebody that's nervous unless they're used to talking, but I may have that mic in the middle of the table instead of my cell phone. It'll pick up the sound just fine. Okay, so mic placement. I guess since I was talking about other microphones, with a cell phone, you're not going to stick it in somebody's face. That would, just like you're going to pull back from that. But maybe it's somebody you're recording and they're used to talking, but maybe not used to talking in front of a microphone. There is something called plosives, which is a sound that your mouth can make into a microphone that can be really annoying and difficult to clean up. If you put your hand in front of your mouth and say B, T, P, especially with the P and the T, there's a puff of air that hits your hand. Well, if that microphone was your hand, that puff of air is hitting it, and you'll hear this, just a sound and you can't get rid of it. It's just there. And so getting the mic too close can cause problems. Getting the mic far away can cause problems. So you have to have this happy medium. A few inches is good. If it's too far away, like we heard in a couple of those recordings, the voices were low because the people talking and being recorded were far from the mic. It might have been one end of the table and they were talking at the other end. The other thing that happens, especially in a large space, if I didn't have this amplification, what I'm hearing from the hall is I'm hearing my voice echoing back at me. And the recorder would hear that too. Granted, with software you can reduce that, but it's much better to, if you're going to be in an echoey room, get the mic as close to the person as possible so that is the loudest sound into the microphone. And the room echo will still be there, but it's not going to be annoying to the point of you feel like you've wasted your time. So phones have built-in applications for recording, voice recorder or voice memo. But if you go onto the application stores, there are a lot of third-party recording applications that have many more capabilities than the built-in recorders. And some of those are free, some of those are $5. You can have something that will be able to record high-quality audio files. And it doesn't cost you very much, and you can easily edit the file in the application. So again, do research on the app stores of your mobile device and see what's out there. Use Google searches. Ask Mr. Google for opinions about this app or that app, because there's always somebody out there putting out opinions, and you may buy one and decide, this isn't what I want. You've not wasted a lot of money, but it gives you more capabilities. Thoughts on a single person versus multiple people in a conversation or in an interview. It's really difficult to get the people to avoid talking over each other if they're more than one person that you're talking to. But if you're paying attention to the times that they're talking over each other, pause and get one or the other of them or both of them to say it by themselves. And can you repeat what you said about this? Can you repeat what you said about that? And that way you have clean recordings of what they're trying to say rather than the jumbled mess. Sometimes overlapping can be fun, and it's just like, let's leave it this way because they were having a good time and it's part of the experience. But still go back maybe and capture as a solo recording one person talking about a particular event. Sharing the audios when you're done. You can MP3 files. I guess I should talk about two audio formats. MP3 files are small. They sound really pretty good, and because they're small, they're easy to share. If you're doing high quality recording that you want to be able to noise reduce later or have somebody fix later, you want to use what are called WAV files, W-A-V. And it's basically a high quality file. Settings are bit depth and bit rate. And you can tell it how much data it's going to collect for each second that you're recording. And the higher the quality, the bigger the file. So there's a trade-off there between what you're doing. When I was doing audio dubbing work for Alaska Heritage, I would record to my computer at the highest possible WAV file that my computer could record, because then I was going to go in later and it would give me far more data to play with when I was trying to remove the interfering sounds or to reduce the interfering sounds. But an MP3 file, which is what I sent to Craig's schools after I finished them, it was totally adequate for what they needed, easy to share. They could pass them around to anybody who wanted. And I told them that I've got the original WAV files I recorded so that if they needed something else, then I had that information. And the thing is about old audio files, that collection was quite amazing because they were talking to people about subsistence hunting, subsistence gathering. There was even a recording of Dr. Sobolev on there. He was talking about civil rights way back then, and a recording that the Craig schools had. So that's one thing, I guess, as one person mentioned, recordings of songs and stuff. A lot of people have cassette tapes, and there's some gems of information that were recorded long ago, and the people that were on those tapes are no longer with us. And sharing a cassette tape is really difficult. So getting them digitized in some manner or other is a useful thing to do so that you can share them further along. And by digitally recording your own interviews now, they can be shared with other people. So let's pause here again and see if there are any other questions. I've covered a huge amount of material, and I want to make sure that I'm not leaving anybody in the dust. Yes, sir.
Archiving information off your cell phone, how do you get it from your cell phone to someplace else or something else more permanent than your phone? You might drop in the water tomorrow.
Right. That would be where you would need to know how the application on your phone works. The base application, voice recorder, voice memo, there should be a way of exporting that. I don't know what it is for each of these phones, but that's where YouTube is your friend. And you can look up, okay, voice recorder, exporting audio. Somebody will have given you information on how to do that. And with regard to when I'm recording stuff to my computer, it's already on my computer as a file that I can do what I want with as any file. I convert it into MP3. I can save it to an external drive. It becomes a file. But yes, on a device, it's hard. On some of the handheld third-party recorders that like Zoom makes, and Zoom is a brand name, it's not just the audio conferencing method, those are recorded on SD cards, so you could just pop about and plug it into your computer. And there you have it then where you can edit it on software. Yes?
When you're digitizing cassette tape and there's no slate, can you add, or do you add slates for the beginning of the recording before?
If I'm dubbing a cassette tape, I will just take the tape as it is. What Sea Alaska Heritage wanted were archival copies to begin with. And so I would make a highest quality I could record, digital copy of the entire thing, warts and all. And so therefore I didn't touch that. And I didn't want to insert my own voice on some historic recording. So I would just take very careful notes. And so the file would have a long name to it, which included a lot of information. I would have a spreadsheet that included the same information. And usually I would record information on what I'd done to the tape so that somebody could go back later and, because when you are noise reducing, even with the very best software, and I use the best software that money can buy these days, there are artifacts. You cannot take out all of the noises that you would like to get rid of perfectly. There's going to be some leftover bits and pieces. And sometimes those sound okay. Sometimes they sound like, maybe I'd prefer just letting a little bit more of the noise in rather than having this wonky sound. So yeah, with archival recordings, I don't put myself on the recording, but I will take, lots of notes. Okay, well, I've run through a lot of what I wanted to say to you. Basically, I want you to feel encouraged to, let's figure out how to use the app on your phone. Test it yourself, stick it in front of you and just start talking into it and experiment with exporting.
I was going to show you what exporting looks like. This is what exporting looks like on an iPhone.
Well, I can't display that.
Oh.
I don't have a camera. Anyway.
But it took you to mail a message.
Okay. Yeah, on Apple for sure, which is what I have, you can share. There's a little icon for sharing things. And so if it's any file, you can hit that and it'll share it to another device by AirDrop or email. And so I would be terribly surprised if Android devices didn't have exactly the same functionality to be able to just simply send that file as it is to someplace else. And the voice memo has a section called Edit. I don't know how complete it is. I don't know if you can edit things in the middle, but I know you can clip unwanted stuff at the beginning of a recording and unwanted stuff at the end. Just remember, when you start the recorder, you don't have to tell the person you're recording that you've started the recorder because they don't really know what you're doing. You want them to just pay attention to you and talk. And so you start the recording in plenty of time so you don't miss anything at the beginning. Slate the recording. And again, slating is listed on that sheet that I handed out, but who it is you're talking to, where you are, the date, and your name so that somebody else later knows where it all came from. And just let it run. If your device, if it's the phone or a separate app or a physical device, has a level meter, check on that to make sure that it is at a reasonable recording level, not so low that you're getting more noise than anything, and not so high that you're clipping. And clipping is when the recorded sound can't get any higher, even though it went higher, and so the top just gets chopped off and it's gone. Again, there are ways of repairing that, but it's only repairing it. It's not making it the best original. Yeah, I think that's about all I have to say. Recording this stuff is so important. And like I said, the reactions I got from Craig's schools when they finally played their tape, one of them that recorded was it just sounds like she's in the room with me after all these years. And it's like, okay, cool. And finding the Sobolev recording, I don't think they even knew they had that. But there it is. Yes, sir.
Yeah, do you have any interview strategies? Because one thing I noticed was when I tried to do a couple of oral interviews, what I thought people would be interested in talking about was not what they were actually interested in talking about. And so by the last interview I did, I sort of reshaped my questions to try to follow the path of the interviewee as opposed to the interviewer. And so I was kind of curious if you had any other sort of interview strategies to, make sure good stories are heard.
So the question was, what if the person you're interviewing wants to talk about something else? That's sometimes the way it is. Maybe you can coax them into it. Maybe a later date you can get them. But yeah, basically go with the flows. The basic thing is to get them talking, and maybe if they never want to talk about a particular thing you're interested in, that's the answer to the question, that they don't want to talk about it. And that's fine. I mean, you are asking them to give you their time to talk to you, and so you have to respect whatever it is they're going to tell you, and whatever it is they're willing to say or not willing to say. And maybe if it's an important bit for a story that you're trying to do, like for a news story, you may have to go someplace else. Or you may have to ask questions like, who else knows about this? And maybe they'll be able to tell you that. But that can be hard if they don't want to. I think most of what you're going to try to do, unless it's an actual news interview, is with people that are pretty willing to talk to you because they want to share their stories. But sometimes that's not the case. Yes?
If you have time, can you talk about consent a little bit, maybe? And if, do you include that in the slate? A consent statement, or?
I think what we're doing, I mean, if you're going to use this in a way, I mean, the cassette recordings I did, the people are all gone. So there's no consent to give. If you're recording somebody now and the idea is just to save the stories for later after they've died, again, there's no consent to give. If you're going to be posting this on the internet or otherwise making it available while they are still alive, then yes, you should have their consent to do that. To record it, if they're willing to let you record it, that's fine. But if you're going to do anything else with it, that they might not want you to do, you need to have their written consent to do that. And you can look up, again, ask Mr. Google, audio consent, interview consent forms. You'll find lots of information on how to craft that you can make to your own cassette. Certainly if you're going to try to take something that you've recorded from a living person and do it for pay, or again, just even post it on the internet. Once it's on the internet, then it's everywhere. And it no longer becomes their story. It becomes whoever wants to listen to it. And they can record it. You can rip audio off of the internet very easily. And then it becomes somebody else's property to mess around with and distort. So, cassette form, consent permission slip, A consent form is a useful thing if you're going to do something other than just archive the story for the future, for your kids to hear after grandma's died or something like that. Yes?
I was going to address that same thing. I'm Mary Beth Moss. I work for the Park Service as a cultural anthropologist, and consent forms are essential from our point of view, even if we're using materials that are from deceased individuals. And so I would encourage anybody who's recording to get a consent form signed and then to specify, what can this material be used for? Is it just for family? Is it for, just a specific plan? Can it be used, for educational purposes or more many folks who are in the documentary film producing business, they won't use materials unless they have a consent form. So, especially if you're collecting material from treasured elders and cultural bearers, you want to make that as useful as they'd like it to be. And so having those consent forms and having those consent forms travel with the recording, so when you send that recording to somebody, make sure that the consent form in some version, Xerox or digital version of it travels with it so that they're always coupled together.
So the short answer is consent forms are your friend. And they can definitely avoid a lot of problems if there's any contest about something. Thank you, Jacqueline. Anything else? Okay, well, thank you all for coming. If you want to know anything more about sort of advanced work that I did with the Sea Alaska Heritage and other cassette recordings, there's plenty of time for me to talk about that, but it may be a case of eyes glazing over if I go too deep into tech.